Welcome into OutKick, the show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. Appreciate all of you hanging out with us as we are rolling through the Thursday edition of the program, getting you ready for the NFL college football weekend. I'm going to be doing The Fade with Kelly Stewart, which we will tape right after this show is over. And then tomorrow, I'm off to Washington, D.C. for the inaugural balls. I'm even going to be wearing a tuxedo. Should be a lot of fun. Buck's going to be up there with his wife, Carrie, my wife, Laura. Should be a good trip. Excited to go there. But probably not going to be back with the show until Wednesday, although I'll be on a lot of Fox News shows. And obviously, I'm going to be doing Clay and Buck from our D.C. studios on Monday and Tuesday. But it's playoff time, now or never. Don't miss out on the last few weeks of football action with Prize Picks, where you can win up to 1,000 times your money. Prize Picks offers MasterCard quick and easy deposits into your account. I've got a pick for you right now, but I want to tell you, download the app today. Use code OutKick, $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. I went exclusively with what I think is the best game of the weekend. The game between the Ravens and the Bills. We'll talk more about how I think that game is going to go out with Kelly Stewart in a little bit. But this kind of gives you an indication of what I see as the game plan. I think the Bills are going to say, we are not going to allow you to beat us running the football or with the read option. I think that's going to be the Buffalo Bills game plan. If I'm wrong, and the Ravens are able to run the football, the Ravens are going to win this game. But I think the Bills are going to stack the line. I'm going with less than 96.5 rushing yards for Derrick Henry. That's a big number in a playoff game. Derrick Henry could have a great game and only have 90 rushing yards. For Lamar Jackson also, I'm going less than 54.5 yards rushing. I think the Bills are going to line up and flood the zone and say, Lamar Jackson, you got to beat us in the passing game. We're going to play a lot of man coverage, and that's going to be the way that we handle this. And if you beat us in the passing game, so be it, but we're not going to allow you to dominate and control the game running the football. So I'm going less on Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. I'm going with Josh Allen, more than 1.5 passing yards. Rushing attack game from the Bills, nowhere near as good as the Ravens. I think they're going to have to throw the football. And I also think Lamar Jackson's going to have to throw the football and will end up with more than 220.5 passing yards. If I'm right, that pays off at 10-1. PrizePicks.com, code OutKick for $50 when you play your first $5. You can get hooked up right now. Again, go to PrizePicks.com, use code OutKick. Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, less on rushing yards. Josh Allen, more on passing touchdowns. And Lamar Jackson, more on passing yards. If I am correct in all of that, then you are going to be well on your way to getting hooked up in a significant manner. There you go, PrizePicks.com, code OutKick. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, let's talk about running your game. Immense credit to the team at OutKick. In the wake of the Sugar Bowl terror attack, the 14 innocent people of all different backgrounds that were murdered in cold blood by an ISIS terrorist on Bourbon Street, they had to move the Sugar Bowl. And they moved the Sugar Bowl to the next day. For those of you who remember, huge game between Notre Dame and Georgia. Thankfully, OutKick covered this as it should be covered. The game was secondary to the experience of seeing New Orleans come together, Notre Dame fans come together, Georgia fans come together, as the national anthem played and as the moment of silence for the terror victims occurred. As the national anthem was finished and the flag was out on the field, everyone in the stadium in unison began to chant, USA, USA, USA. And I could not believe that ESPN didn't cover that unifying, incredibly powerful moment that brought everybody together, regardless of their background, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, male, female, gay, straight. Everybody in that stadium, that Sugar Bowl, that city of New Orleans, 60,000 plus, chanting USA, USA, USA. And I wrote a piece about it. Some of you read it. Many of you did. And I compared the way that George W. Bush first pitch, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, whatever your politics were, how that Yankee Stadium Game 3 back in October of 2001 was an incredibly unifying moment for everyone as we said to the terrorists, you're not going to win. ESPN made a documentary about that called First Pitch, but their culture had so deteriorated, in my opinion, that they managed to fail at covering the moment of silence and the national anthem. Now, to ESPN's credit, since then, they've been covering the prayer, they've been covering the national anthem, they've been covering everything, but they have not publicly acknowledged a screw-up until now. I want to play this audio for you, let you all hear it. This is ESPN Vice President of Programming, Burke Magnus. I know Burke, and I said in my column, I know Burke well. I know he's a big sports fan. I don't know Jimmy Pitaro well or Bob Iger well. I don't know that I've ever met either man, but I do know that all three of those people, President, CEO of Disney, the CEO of Disney, Bob Iger, President of ESPN, Jimmy Pitaro, and VP of Production, I'm not sure of his official title, Burke Magnus. Those are the three guys that basically make ESPN happen. All huge sports fans. Burke Magnus went on a podcast here that I'm going to play for you, a sports media podcast. Adam, tell me who the hosts of this podcast are. I'll give them credit on the back end after we play this audio. Initially, ESPN said, it was just a timing issue. Now, the true story is coming out. Here is Burke Magnus, VP, acknowledging ESPN screwed up in a huge way in not covering that national anthem, that moment of silence, that incredibly unifying moment for everyone at the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans.
There's a group of people in Bristol who just made an enormous mistake. It was a human error. It happens. I don't want to minimize it by any stretch. But as you noted, nothing was normal about that next day, including our programming lineup, where we normally would have had College Game Day and that crew leading into the game. It wasn't that. It was Sports Center, which is done out of Bristol instead of inside. I could give you a whole host of reasons why it was not the normal circumstance. But at the end of the day, that was just a horrible error that was made by a group of really well-intentioned people who feel terrible about it. The notion that was somehow intentional or we were trying to avoid acknowledging what was a horrific situation in New Orleans was really misplaced. It was just a mistake that we feel terrible about. And by the way, we should be held to account for.
Okay, that is from the Austin Karp and Molly Callahan sports media focused podcast. We just played that audio from. And I believe it's Austin credit for asking that question. And I give credit to Burke Magnus for answering that question finally. But it has been, what's the date now? It has been 2 weeks, basically, since that game was played. And it took 2 weeks for ESPN to come out and say, and I jotted down the quotes, that was an enormous mistake. That was a terrible mistake. That was a horrible error. We should be held to account for it. Not good by any measuring stick. Not up to our standards. Now, I told you at that point in time when I wrote and talked about this, and that's Burke Magnus quotes describing the screw up there. Credit for addressing it. That should have been the statement the day after the game. Instead of trying to say, it was just a timing issue, there's nothing here. I think it goes directly to the culture that ESPN has created that, frankly, does not love America like the average sports fan loves America. And I said there are only two possibilities here. I said the timing error thing is a lie, okay? Toss that to the side. This is too big of a screw-up. It's not just a timing error. Either this was an intentional decision not to cover it. He also throws the Sports Center producers under the bus, significant. They are the people, he said they felt horrible about it, but they are the people who were in control of the decisions being made then. That's in Bristol, Connecticut, where ESPN is based, nobody stood up. Let me just tell you the two options. Two options. One is that it was a total screw-up and an all-systems failure. The other option is it was an intentional decision. They are saying, ESPN is, hey, this was an all-systems failure. It's a total screw-up. It was a horrible error. It was a terrible mistake. We deserve to be criticized for it. They are claiming it was not intentional. Here's what I would say and why I believe these are connected. Your culture dictates the choices that are made. Long in advance of the programming schedule, there is a clock that is shared that everybody knows what's happening when it's happening. Nobody at ESPN Sports Center raised their hand and said, hey, guys, this is a monumentally huge moment for America. It's far more important than the game itself or some commercial break that we got to hit. We've got to be there for the national anthem. We have to be there for the moment of silence. We have to show all of this because it's a historic moment, and the resilience of the people of New Orleans deserve to be heard and seen. They didn't do that. This is a failure of culture. And whether you're Bob Iger, Burke Magnus, or Jimmy Pitaro, the trio of guys that are leading ESPN, you're responsible for the culture you create. I'm responsible to some extent, certainly before I sold, for the culture of OutKick. I'm responsible for what I say on Clay and Buck. I'm responsible for what I say on here. And by the way, I get ripped all the time for things that I have nothing to do with. We screw up something at OutKick. Do you know who gets all the tweets? Me. I don't even own the company anymore. We screw up a headline. We screw up a story. A lot of people look immediately to me and say, Clay, you screwed this up. That's kind of the reality. And so what helps to avoid screw-ups is the culture that you create. Nobody's perfect. But if you create a culture that believes, hey, America's awful, hey, we don't need to host the national anthem, then this is the kind of thing that happens. Now, to ESPN's credit, they're even covering pregame prayers now. I've never seen ESPN ever cover a pregame prayer. They haven't missed a national anthem since. They should have come out and told this immediately. OutKick has had tens of millions of video views on this because the vast majority of American sports fans agree with us. And I would say if the vast majority of American sports fans believe that you made the intentional decision to do this, it's a sign that your culture is broken and that lots of people don't like you. And ESPN's got to rectify that. Now, maybe Burke Magnus and Jimmy Pitaro and Bob Iger let heads roll over this. I think the fact that they threw SportsCenter under the bus is pretty significant. Oh, they felt awful about it, but by the way, that was the producers at SportsCenter. That wasn't our game producers. At least now we're starting to get the truth, which is not, it was just a timing issue. It's that they screwed up monumentally and took from us what should have been an historic and unifying and resilient moment in the face of terror, and they did so with this garbage. So, I give credit for finally acknowledging it. It shouldn't have taken 2 weeks. I give credit to, I think it's Austin Karp, who asked the question, because I called out sports media. You guys are sitting around like, hey, can you believe Tony Romo in the third quarter said this thing to Jim Nantz, and let's turn that into a huge story, but you don't actually write or cover, by and large, the biggest screw-up of a production story in the 21st century, one that NBC, CBS, and Fox producers, as well as a lot of ESPN people, reached out to me and said, I can't believe they did this. We'll see if anybody even writes about this comment other than OutKick or shares it with you, but the full story now being told, we talked a lot about it. I trust my audience. I trust you guys to be able to hear it. There you have it, the full discussion of Burke Magnus. By the way, I'll put this out there. These guys watch and listen to a lot of OutKick and read a lot of OutKick coverage. Open invite to Burke Magnus, to Bob Iger, to Jimmy Pitaro. Anyone who wants to address my criticism of them and say, hey, you're wrong, you're inaccurate, I think that you are not correctly diagnosing, analyzing ESPN-related issues, sports media culture as it pertains to our network, open invite to any of those three men, to each of them individually. I will travel anywhere in the country that you want to go. I will sit down, we'll turn on a camera, we'll turn on an audio file, and you can take issue with anything that I've ever said and tell me why I'm completely wrong. Open invite. So if you guys know how to get in touch with me. If you want to have that opportunity to address the OutKick audience directly, which, by the way, is massive and growing and substantial and incredibly good-looking and very wealthy. If you want to address all of these people, you have the opportunity, open forum. You tell me anytime, any place, anywhere. I don't run from criticism. I don't run from people who disagree with me and people who want their story to be told that they disagree with the story that I am telling. So open forum there. But again, enormous mistake, terrible mistake, horrible error. We should be held to account for it. Not good by any measure, not up to our standards. That is Burke Magnus, ESPN VP, discussing the failure to cover the anthem and also the moment of silence and all of that. Credit 2 weeks too late, but the full story now coming out. Okay, let me hit this right off the top, too. Rest in peace, Bob Uecker. Bob Uecker, I know many of you are Monster fans. I would suggest that Bob Uecker's character, Harry Doyle, am I correct about that? Make sure that's right, Adam. If I remember correctly, it was Harry Doyle was the name of the Cleveland Indians radio broadcaster on the iconic sports humor movie Major League. I think that was the character that most people first got to know Bob Uecker from. Now, Bob Uecker was on WrestleMania. Bob Uecker was on Miller Lite commercials. He had an entire history based on how bad of a baseball player he was. And he was 90 years old. He passed today. So I know many of you big Bob Uecker fans. I'm old school. I remember Harry Carey, that era of Major League Baseball announcers when you never really knew what any of these guys were going to say, when Harry Carey might sit down in a broadcast booth and have already had 8 beers in the afternoon at a Cub game, him with Steve Stone, if I remember correctly. I watched a lot of WGN games for the Chicago Cubs back in the day in the 80s and the 90s as a kid, home during the summer when my parents were both working. I watched a lot of Major League Baseball, huge baseball fan back in the day, but I loved back in that era that the Cubs were on almost every afternoon on WGN. I'd put it on. I'd watch TBS Superstation games with the Braves back in the day. That's why many of you became Cubs or Braves fans, is being able to have access to their games back in the day in the 80s and 90s. And so rest in peace to Bob Uecker, iconic. I would argue for the fact, in my opinion, or the opinion, that Major League is the funniest sports movie that has ever been made. Now, I'm biased because I remember being a kid and going and watching it in the theater and how awesome I thought it was. Serrano, Willie Mays Hayes, the Charlie Sheen, Taylor Vaughn, Rick Wild Thing Vaughn, character that he had just a bit outside. So it's a loss today. Bob Uecker, 90 years old. I absolutely loved him. And rest in peace, and condolences to everybody associated with the Uecker family and his friends as well. Okay, I've got a big story up on foxnews.com. It's also up at OutKick today. They reached out and they said, hey, can you write something about what you think is significant as the presidential inauguration is closer and closer to happening? 4 days from now, Trump will raise his right hand, January 20th, be sworn in. And I've hammered this on the show, but I'm going to continue to do so. And I encourage you guys to go read it. I shared it from my Twitter account. Trump's win over Kamala Harris, 2024, all 50 states moved to the right, won all 7 of the battleground states, 312 electoral votes, the national popular vote. Trump's win is the least racially polarized election win in the life of almost anyone out there who is watching or listening to me right now. Not since a pre-civil rights America in 1964 has a presidential election been less racially divisive. That's because Trump massively increased his Black, Hispanic, Asian support. He won by a big margin, young men 18 to 29 years old. And in the process, I believe he has changed everything in the culture of America. And I don't think we have a picture of this, but I bet when we share a shorter version of this, we will. But when you actually go and look, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, all being at the inauguration is a sign of how much has changed since 2016 when Trump won and the resistance was out there and everybody was trying to claim that Russia had got him elected and that he was a Nazi. All that talk basically ended when he won the popular vote. But Margot McAtee, who is behind the scenes with Trump, his assistant, she does phenomenal work. She shared a photo of the CEO of Coke coming to Mar-a-Lago and giving Trump a special Diet Coke edition of Trump. Now, I've interviewed Trump, I think, 10 times now, and it has been the case that he regularly consumes a lot of Diet Cokes. He just pops them, runs through them like crazy. Man loves Diet Coke. But what does that represent? Some of you say, like, wow, what's the big deal? The fact that the CEO of Coke is showing up at Mar-a-Lago and designing a special Diet Coke for Trump is just clear and present evidence, as if we needed more of it, of the major cultural shift that has occurred since Trump won. The resistance is over. There is no shrieking ladies in vagina hats. Even the way CNN and MSNBC are carrying and covering Trump has changed overnight. And I think this is all tied in with the Washington Post. To me, all of these stories are connected. The Washington Post today essentially announced that they are doing away with their "Democracy Dies in Darkness" slogan that they emblazoned at the top of the newspaper when Trump won election. And the new mission statement is riveting storytelling for all of America. So democracy dies in darkness out. The new slogan is riveting storytelling for all of America. If that is true, kind of a bland slogan in general, but most slogans are fairly bland because they're the product of a lot of different people being involved, and there's not much risk-taking associated with them and everything else. If that is true, and Jeff Bezos now wants the Washington Post to cover all of America and not to be a left-wing propaganda rag, bravo to him. And I think it connects with the Diet Coke. I think it connects with Elon and Zuckerberg's decision and Bezos himself being at the inauguration. And I give him immense credit because he spent $250 million on the Washington Post. Down the stretch in the election, he decided that the Washington Post should no longer be endorsing candidates in a presidential manner. He has hired new people, including a top executive editor from the Wall Street Journal, who I believe is starting to try to at least create some semblance of objectivity on behalf of the Washington Post. And I give immense credit to them for the work that they are now doing to try to make the Washington Post more of a newspaper representative of all Americans of all backgrounds. I'm a subscriber. So I have a Washington Post subscription. I have a New York Times subscription. I have a Wall Street Journal subscription. I try to read all three every day. And in fact, I do. And that's because I want to have as varied of a media background and exposure, even when I disagree with things. I think you only strengthen your arguments by understanding the arguments that others are going to make. So I see all of these things as tied together. Diet Coke, Trump, new slogan at the Washington Post, the cultural ascendancy of what I would call American sanity is upon us. And in 4 days, it will truly become ascendant as Trump raises his right hand and takes the oath of office to become president one more time. Couple of other things that are out there. There is a photo, and I believe we have it, of Daniel Penny, who was accused of choking Jordan Neely to death, riding the New York City subways. And I want to put that photo up, and I'm going to make an argument that a lot of you may not expect. Okay, there is Daniel Penny, and he is just right back to riding the New York City subways. He's like Batman. Every Batman movie, every Spider-Man movie set in Gotham, set in New York City, you have the character arc at some point where the city is trying to decide, wait, is Batman a hero or a villain? Is Spider-Man a hero or a villain? Do we need him or not? So there's Daniel Penny, the Batman of the New York City subways. Let me tell you something. This guy's braver than me. I would, no way, be right back on the subway if the city of New York had tried to put me in prison for protecting people on the subway. I would have mental trauma over the trial, and I would be a Uber guy, I would be a walk guy, I would be a taxi guy. I'm just being honest with you. I don't think that I would go back down into the subway this fast. Immense credit to Daniel Penny and his incredible mental toughness. And here's the analogy I would make with that. It reminds me of, do you remember Bethany Hamilton, the 13-year-old girl surfer who got her arm ripped off by a shark and then went back in to become one of the greatest surfers in the country? And then also Bethany Hamilton spoke out against men deciding to compete against women and took a lot of slings and arrows for it. This is who real heroes are, okay? I think we overuse the word hero, but if you are so brave and courageous and mentally tough that you get your arm ripped off by a shark and then go right back into the surf and become one of the greatest surfers ever, or you get charged with involuntary manslaughter and they try to put you in prison for years, and you go right back to the subway, the scene of where they tried to imprison you for years. This is what mental fortitude, mental toughness, and bravery and courage really represents. Because I'm going to be honest with y'all. I would be afraid. If I lost half my arm to a shark, there is no way in hell I'm ever going out anywhere very far in the ocean ever again. Not happening. I'm too much of a coward. What do we always say? DBAP, don't be a pussy. But also SBAP, sometimes be a pussy. I would be a total and complete pussy. If I survived a shark attack and I lost an arm, I am not going back in the ocean, to say nothing of going all the way back in the ocean with my surfboard and doing that. That is a level of mental toughness, bravery, and courage that I don't have. I don't think similarly, Daniel Penny, credit to him. I love this guy. When I saw that, I said, my goodness, what incredible bravery, mental toughness, and also just normalcy to be like, hey, I was in the center of the storm of this hurricane, but maybe I need to protect somebody else on the subway again. I'm going right back in, and I would make the right exact same decision if necessary again. And I'm just going to sit on the subway and read a book and not even worry about any danger or anybody doing anything to me because they're upset at me. I see these as connected. Bethany Hamilton, Daniel Penny, I love you both. Bravery, courage, mental toughness. I would love for my kids to grow up and be as tough as you guys are. I'm not. I am not as tough as you guys are. I don't think I could do either thing. I don't think I would. Couple of other things that are out there. Deion Drama. I am in favor 100% of Deion getting hired as the next Dallas Cowboy coach. I told you that I question whether it will be successful because I question whether Dak Prescott can win at a high level. I don't know that he's good enough to take anybody to a Super Bowl, whether it's Bill Belichick, whether it's Sean Payton, whether it's Sean McVay, whether it's Mike Tomlin, whoever, Andy Reid, whoever you think the best coach in the NFL is right now, or the best coach in the NFL in past years. I don't know that that matters if the Cowboys hire them. Having said that, the amount of attention, the amount of fun, the amount of sheer hyperbole that would rain down every week if Deion is the coach of the Cowboys is so compelling and so good for the NFL that I cannot in any way imagine anything more entertaining from an NFL coaching hire perspective than that. One more story that I flagged here. The Biden farewell address was garbage, as you guys likely expected, because Joe Biden has never been eloquent or particularly perceptive or well-spoken, even before he had mental and physical decline due to what I think is clear dementia and aging. But I did read in the Wall Street Journal that Kamala Harris is now upset that Joe Biden keeps telling media, both publicly and privately, that if he had run against Trump, he would have won, because she sees it as a direct attack on her. This is the Cold War going forward. This is my prediction for all of you. I don't know what Kamala Harris's next move is going to be, what her path forward is likely to entail. But if she's going to run for president again, and let me remind you, Kamala Harris is not as wounded right now from this loss as Trump was after Jan 6, 2021. So 4 years is a long time. There could be a big comeback. But let me remind you that in order to make that comeback, Kamala Harris is going to have to eventually say, the reason I lost was because Joe Biden left me too big of a hole to make up. Kamala is going to have to make the argument, either privately or publicly, that the reason she lost was Biden had built up too big of a deficit, and no matter who the backup quarterback was, she couldn't come in and find a way to win. That's what she's going to have to argue. Because otherwise, the only other outcome is Americans considered her, did not like her, and rejected her, much like Democrats did in the 2020 presidential race, when they kicked her to the curb with no support before the Iowa vote even started, and she had zero support, basically. So, get ready. I don't know when it's going to happen, but Biden is trying to define his legacy as part of this speech by saying, hey, I shouldn't have gotten forced out. This is the argument that he's implicitly making. And if I had not gotten forced out, I would have beat Trump like I beat him in 2020. I don't think that's true, but that's his legacy now, because he's going to say Democrats blew it. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Kamala Harris, everybody, George Clooney in the Democrat Party elite who lined up and kicked me to the curb, they were wrong. I would have won. And he kind of has the heads I win, tails you lose dynamic, because if Kamala had won, they were trying to say he's George Washington. He walked away from power and provided the next generation with a legacy of success. That argument doesn't exist anymore. Now it is for Biden, I would have won. Kamala hasn't really fired back yet. What I anticipate eventually having to happen is Kamala saying, I didn't win. I only had 100 days, and Biden left me such a huge deficit that I did the best I could. I came within a point or so, 230,000 votes in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Biden would have lost by 1 million votes, whether it's true or not. And if I had a full election cycle, I would have won. That's what I need going forward. She's going to have to make that pivot if she's interested in running for president again. When is it going to happen? I think sometime in 2025. Get ready for that argument to start to be trotted out. All right. I love all of you. And by the way, the story out there, Wall Street Journal says Kamala's upset that Biden keeps saying that he would have won, and that basically, implicitly, that's a criticism of her because he's saying he would have done better than her. All right. I love all of you. I will be back either Tuesday night, depending on how travel goes, or I will be back Wednesday. Going to be up at the inauguration. Going to be up in D.C. I'll be on Fox News quite a lot. So you'll see me there, and I'll be doing Clay and Buck on Monday and Tuesday. DBAP, unless you need to SBAP right now, I am putting on my earpiece, and we are recording a Fade Spectacular. I have got all of my gambling picks right here on this paper in front of me for the NFL and for the College Football National Championship. DBAP, unless you need to SBAP. Appreciate all of you. This has been OutKick, the show.